The metal touched the desk. The sound, a soft clink, cut through the studio. Johnny Carson's cue cards fell from his hands. It was March 1977. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio 6B in Burbank. Another Thursday night. Another monologue about Washington politics. Another audience of 300 people settling in for laughs and celebrity interviews and Ed McMahon's booming voice. Everything was routine. Everything was comfortable. Everything was exactly what America expected at 11:30 p.m. Until the elderly man in the guest chair reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out something small wrapped in faded cloth, and placed it carefully on Johnny's desk. The cloth fell away. An old military medal. Bronze. Tarnished. The ribbon faded to almost nothing. The kind of metal that had been carried for decades, touched by nervous fingers in quiet moments, kept close like a prayer. The metal made contact with the wooden desk. That tiny sound, clink, somehow audible over everything else. Johnny was mid-sentence. Something about the energy crisis. The audience was chuckling. Ed was grinning at the desk. The cameras were rolling smoothly. And then Johnny heard that sound. His hands opened. The blue cue cards he'd been holding scattered across the desk, some sliding to the floor. His mouth stayed open but no words came out. His eyes locked on the metal with an expression the audience had never seen before, recognition mixed with something that looked like pain. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. The elderly man in the guest chair was named Robert Hutchins. 73 years old. Simple suit. Veteran's pin on his lapel. Hands that trembled slightly with age or emotion or both. He'd driven 8 hours from a small town in Oregon to be here tonight, and he hadn't told anyone why. The audience didn't understand what was happening. The laughter died into confused silence. 300 people leaning forward, sensing something had shifted but not knowing what. Ed McMahon noticed immediately. He leaned toward Johnny, concern crossing his face. "Johnny? You okay, Pally?" Johnny didn't respond. He was staring at that metal like it had reached across 32 years and grabbed him by the throat. Robert Hutchins spoke, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "You recognize it, don't you?" Johnny's jaw clenched. He nodded once, barely perceptible. "It's the Bronze Star," Robert continued, his voice growing stronger. "Awarded for heroic service in the Korean War. But you already know that. Because you were there when the man who earned it died saving your life." The control room erupted into chaos. Director Bobby Quinn was shouting into his headset. "What's happening? Do we go to commercial? Someone tell me what's going on." Producer Fred DeCordova stood frozen behind Bobby, staring at the monitors. "Keep rolling," he said quietly. "Whatever this is, keep rolling." On stage, Johnny Carson, master of composure, king of the quick comeback, the man who could handle any interview situation, sat completely motionless, his eyes never leaving that tarnished piece of metal. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1952. Johnny Carson wasn't always Johnny Carson, beloved television host. In 1952, he was Ensign John William Carson, United States Navy, 26 years old, stationed aboard the USS Pennsylvania off the coast of Korea during the war. He wasn't in combat. Johnny was a communications officer. He decoded messages, managed radio traffic, handled administrative duties. Safe work. Desk work. The kind of assignment that kept you alive while other men went ashore and didn't come back. Johnny had been grateful for that assignment. He had a wife back home. Jody. They'd just gotten married before he shipped out. He wanted to make it back to her. He wanted a future. Being stuck on a ship doing paperwork seemed like the best possible scenario. Until October 17, 1952. A shore leave rotation. Johnny and 5 other sailors given 12 hours in Busan to decompress. They hit a small bar near the docks, nothing fancy, just somewhere to drink beer and pretend they weren't thousands of miles from home. Johnny sat at a corner table with a radioman named Thomas Hutchins. Tommy, everyone called him. 24 years old. From Oregon. Talked constantly about the girl he was going to marry when he got home. Showed everyone her picture so many times they all had it memorized. They were on their third beer when the mortars started falling. North Korean artillery. Close enough that the ground shook. The bar's windows shattered inward. Someone screamed. The bartender was yelling in Korean, pointing toward the back exit. Johnny froze. Complete paralysis. The rational part of his brain knew he should move, should run, should do something. But his body wouldn't respond. He just sat there while chaos erupted around him, while other sailors scrambled for cover, while the world exploded into noise and fire. Tommy Hutchins grabbed Johnny's arm. "Come on! We gotta move!" Johnny couldn't. His legs wouldn't work. Terror had locked every muscle. The second mortar hit closer. The building shook. Part of the ceiling collapsed near the door. Tommy looked at the exit, looked at Johnny, and made a decision. He grabbed Johnny bodily, all 160 pounds of frozen ensign, and half-dragged, half-carried him toward the back of the bar. They made it maybe 20 feet before the third mortar hit. The blast threw them both forward. Johnny felt heat and pressure, and then nothing. He woke up seconds or minutes later. He was never sure. Face down on the floor, ears ringing, dust choking him. Tommy Hutchins was 3 feet away. Not moving. Blood spreading across the floor beneath him. Johnny crawled to him. "Tommy! Tommy, come on! We gotta go! Come on!" Tommy's eyes opened. He tried to smile. "Can't, Johnny. I think this is it." "No. No, you're fine. Come on." Johnny was crying, pulling at Tommy's jacket, trying to lift him. "Listen," Tommy said, his voice fading. "In my pocket. Letter from my girl. Make sure she gets it. Tell her I loved." He didn't finish. His eyes stayed open but the light went out of them. Johnny Carson, 26 years old, covered in his friend's blood, sat in that destroyed bar holding Tommy Hutchins while the mortars kept falling and the world kept ending. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The military conducted an investigation. Determined that Radioman Thomas Hutchins had died in the line of duty. Awarded him a Bronze Star posthumously for valor, for saving another sailor's life at the cost of his own. They gave the medal to Tommy's father. Sent it with a letter explaining how heroically his son had died. They didn't mention the sailor Tommy saved. Johnny Carson requested that his name be kept out of the official report. He couldn't explain why. Guilt, maybe? Shame. The knowledge that he'd frozen, that someone else had died because Johnny couldn't move. Johnny came home 6 months later. He never talked about Korea. Never mentioned Tommy Hutchins. Threw himself into his career with manic intensity, radio, then television, working constantly, building the persona that would make him famous. By 1962, he was hosting The Tonight Show. By the 1970s, he was the biggest star in late-night television. Johnny Carson became a household name, a cultural institution, the man who tucked America into bed every night with laughter. But he never forgot October 17, 1952. He never forgot Tommy Hutchins, who should have run for the exit, who should have saved himself, who instead turned back for a terrified kid who couldn't move his legs. For 25 years, Johnny Carson carried that memory in silence. Until tonight. March 1977. When Robert Hutchins, Tommy's younger brother, drove 8 hours to place his brother's Bronze Star on Johnny's desk on live television. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. The studio was still frozen. Johnny's scattered cue cards lay across his desk. The medal sat among them, catching the studio lights. Ed McMahon had tears in his eyes, Johnny's oldest friend, who knew something terrible was happening but not what. Robert Hutchins sat in the orange guest chair, hands folded in his lap, waiting. He'd waited 25 years for this conversation. He could wait a few more seconds. Johnny finally spoke. His voice was rough, barely controlled. How did you know? My brother wrote me letters, Robert said. Told me about the guys on his ship. Told me about this communications officer named Johnny who wanted to be in show business someday. Told me about the night. His voice broke. The night he died. Another sailor sent my parents a letter. Told them what really happened. That Tommy went back for someone. That he chose to stay. I froze, Johnny said, the words coming out like he'd been holding them behind his teeth for decades. We should have run. We could have both made it. But I froze and he came back for me and he saved your life. Robert interrupted gently. He made a choice, Mr. Carson. A brave one. And I need you to understand something. I need everyone here to understand something. He gestured to the audience, to the cameras, to the millions watching at home. I spent years angry. Angry that my brother died. Angry at the war. Angry at whoever that sailor was that Tommy saved. Because why did he get to live when Tommy didn't? Robert's voice was steady now, strong. But then I started watching your show. Started seeing the joy you brought to people. Started understanding that my brother didn't die for nothing. He died so Johnny Carson could live. So Johnny Carson could make millions of people laugh every single night for decades. Tears were streaming down Johnny's face now. No attempt to hide them. No jokes to deflect. Just raw grief finally allowed to surface. I don't deserve. Johnny started. Yes, you do, Robert said firmly. That's why I'm here. That's why I brought his medal. Because I want you to have it. I want you to stop carrying the guilt. My brother made his choice. He saved you. And look what you did with that life. Look what you built. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny Carson stood up, walked around his desk, and embraced Robert Hutchins. The audience erupted. Not in applause yet, but in that collective sound of 300 people crying at once. Ed McMahon was sobbing openly. Doc Severinsen had his trumpet pressed against his forehead, shoulders shaking. The camera operators were wiping their eyes while trying to keep their shots steady. Johnny held Tommy's brother for a long moment. When he pulled back, he picked up the bronze star from his desk. Held it in his palm. I can't take this, Johnny said. This belongs to your family. My family wants you to have it, Robert replied. My mother made me promise. She said find Johnny Carson and tell him thank you. Tell him we're proud of what he became. Tell him Tommy would be proud. Johnny looked at the medal. At the faded ribbon. At the tarnished bronze that had been kept in a drawer for 25 years. Thank you, he whispered. The audience rose. Standing ovation. Not the excited applause of entertainment, but something deeper. Reverence, catharsis, collective acknowledgement of sacrifice and survival and the complicated weight of being the one who lives. Johnny returned to his desk. He didn't sit down. He stood there, medal in his hand, facing the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice thick but steady, I've done this show for 15 years. I've interviewed presidents and movie stars and musicians. I've told 10,000 jokes. But I've never told you about the bravest man I ever knew. His name was Thomas Hutchins. Radioman, USS Pennsylvania. And he died in Korea in 1952, saving my life when I was too scared to move. The control room was silent. Every technician, every producer, every person involved in making The Tonight Show understood they were witnessing something that transcended television. I've carried the guilt of that night for 25 years. Johnny continued, wondering why I got to live. Why I got all of this. And tonight, Tommy's brother gave me permission to stop asking that question. He held up the bronze star so the camera could see it clearly. This medal represents the bravest choice a man can make. Tommy Hutchins didn't have to come back for me. But he did. And I owe him every single night I've stood behind this desk. Every laugh. Every moment. I owe him everything. Johnny's voice broke. So this is for you, Tommy. Wherever you are. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. The applause was deafening. Robert Hutchins stood and embraced Johnny again, while the audience cried and cheered simultaneously. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After that night, the Bronze Star stayed in a glass case on Johnny's desk for the remaining 15 years of his Tonight Show run. He touched it before every monologue. A reminder. A promise. When Johnny retired in 1992, he donated the medal to the Smithsonian with one request. Place it beside a photo of Tommy Hutchins in his Navy uniform. They rest there together still. The man who saved a life. And the life he saved.